Welcome everyone to our session today. Happy Wednesday and thank you for being with us. I know hopefully it's you taking a break away from tax return preparation, just a little breather, investing in ourselves and our education, and then we're going to get right back into it. But I think this session is very necessary, especially during this time, because a lot of our clients are coming to us with questions or maybe things that they did last year, and we're trying to figure out how we can do this on the tax return, if it's even deductible, if it's includable or not. So tax research, it is very important for us to master so that we don't rely just on Google answers and we have that documentation if and when it's ever needed, not only during an audit, but even for ourselves. If we're trying to train somebody else, another staff to prepare a tax return that we did last year, at least they get an information into what a specific client situation looks like. But with that, we're going to get started with tax research and the age of AI. And just an introduction, I know this is a session open to the entire community. So if we haven't met before, my name is Nadia Rodriguez. I am a CPA and I'm in Dallas, Texas. So I am also in the trenches with you preparing tax returns right now, trying to meet those deadlines with our March 15 deadline coming up for S corporations and for partnerships. So I'm really busy too, but I'm here with us and we're making sure that I am also servicing my clients that I have them on a subscription plan for tax advisory. Because of course, 2025 finished, but we're in 2026 and we're making decisions as the year continues. I'm also the founder of the Nadia CPA Inner Circle, where you're joining us today. So welcome everyone. And this is where we provide a community for tax professionals so that we can help each other out, rely on each other, and be able to learn together, grow together, and succeed together. I'm also the lead instructor of Tax Training Academy, where we have opened up the doors and we have a couple of courses available. We have a course that's available to the pro members. That's a membership that we do have. And we do have courses for them, not only in our circle community, but also now we've opened the doors for the TTA, the Tax Training Academy, for them. So welcome everyone. This session is available for CE credit. So if you do need CE, just make sure that you hang on and stay with us for at least 50 minutes of the session and you answer 2 of the polling questions. That's all we have. Doesn't matter what you answer as long as you submit your answer. Now, I know we're conducting this through Circle Community, so it is going to be a little bit different because there are no polling features within the Circle room. Just that when the polling question comes up, if you can just put your answer in the chat and we're going to document your attendance, just make sure that you select an answer or you type in your answer. So if we will have questions at the end, if you have some availability to stay and hang out with us, we'll have a complimentary 20-minute Q&A session, which you don't have to stay for your CE credit, but definitely hang around and we can spend some time learning from questions of each other and answering those questions. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. What are we going to look at for our 50-minute session together? We're going to look at the hierarchy of tax authority. And why does this matter? Because with the age of technology today, the overload of information out there, how can we sort it out in a way that we can rely on it when we're taking a tax position? And it's very important for us to know this hierarchy. What can we depend on and what can we not depend on that might be better if we can find a hierarchy that's up above in the table. Well, how do you perform the tax research? We're going to talk about just the Internal Revenue Code. What is it? How is it composed? And how can we start reading into the tax law? We're going to verify AI generated citations because AI is an amazing resource, amazing tool, especially in today's age, because we know us as tax professionals, if we're not using AI, we are staying behind. So we need to make sure that you are using AI, but that we're using it in the correct manner. Because we're going to learn about a tax court case at the end of the session where an actual attorney cited or copied and pasted the hallucinations from AI and presented them at tax court. And so the tax court judge saw this and really called it out and made a huge argument about how it is important that if we are using AI, we have to verify the source. And then we're going to talk about tax research memo, because of course we're doing all of this research to back up a position that we're taking for our client. We need to document it. How did we arrive to the conclusion? And again, I know we're really busy during tax season and we might quickly find an answer and it's a primary authority answer that we can rely on. But if we don't document it, it is very easy for us to forget how we arrived to where we arrived, especially even harder for us to explain to an IRS auditor how we arrived to a certain position. So why does this topic matter? Because as tax professionals, we can find easy answers online, but are they reliable? We are tax professionals and we have to abide at bigger due diligence requirements than a taxpayer doing their own tax research. So yes, as tax professionals, we need to know exactly what we're finding online and how to sort through what we're finding so that we can rely on authoritative guidance. So, first, let's talk about just the foundation of tax research, because we know that tax research answers three questions for us. What does the tax law say? How does it apply specifically to our client's facts? And how do we support our position? Now, do we have to do tax research? Most definitely. Are we tax attorneys? If we are, amazing, but I am not a tax attorney. I still have to understand how to read the tax law because our tax code is based on tax law. And that is exactly what we're presenting when we compile a tax return for our tax clients is everything that's on that tax return is based on tax law because we know that tax law goes into the client facts and then eventually our product at the end is our tax return. So when we're looking at the tax hierarchy, now this is what we must follow and this is what is followed for the tax law. It's followed by tax court judges, it's followed by IRS auditors. They very start at the very top is where you begin. You begin at the authoritative primary sources. The law of the land is the Internal Revenue Code. The Internal Revenue Code is Title 26 of our entire law system in the US. The entire law system is composed of many titles where you see maybe Title 8, I think, talks about some employment law. Well, Title 26 is specifically only the tax law. And that is what we need to rely on first. After that, we have Treasury regulations, which expand our tax law sections. And we're going to see a little bit more about that. We go into revenue rulings. We go into IRS notices if there's a specific notice for our client, and then revenue procedures. After that, the one next in line is our tax court interpretations, because what we learn a lot from our tax law in the Internal Revenue Code is that sometimes it does seem a little bit vague, or if it might be a little contradictory at times, but where can we find specific language is the tax court, because that is also the way they are interpreting, that the judges of the tax court are interpreting that tax law. And I think during one of our Schedule C Pro Labs, we were talking about ordinary, necessary, and reasonable for expenses to be deductible for a business. Now, in the tax law, which is the Internal Revenue Code, we never find the word reasonable within how how an expense can be deducted for the business. Instead, the word reasonable has come across through tax court. And it has come across through the findings of a tax court judge. And so you can see that this is primary authority because now everybody will know that deductions for a business must be reasonable, ordinary, and necessary. So we have a tax court, we have federal district court, circuit courts, and then, of course, the Supreme Court. And then at the end, we have the secondary authority. So basically, if you're not finding anything in any of the above primary authority sources, then at that point, yes, you can rely on secondary authority, but it just means it is not binding, which means a tax court can come and destroy your secondary authority that you found because they are relying on maybe some Internal Revenue Code section and they're making an interpretation based on that. So secondary authority is research platforms. We have Checkpoint, our RRA Checkpoint, if anybody's familiar with it. It is a paid service, not very cheap. It's pretty expensive, but it has the library of the entire revenue code and all the primary authorities, and you can use it as a tax research tool. Again, it's not free, but then we also have textbooks, we have blogs, a lot of articles that are written by even CPAs and tax attorneys, EAs, that can you rely on those? If you don't find any authoritative information, then we can you rely on the blog. It's not one that you can probably base your position on that, but it's not binding if it's ever questioned by a tax court judge or an IRS attorney or an IRS auditor. We can rely on articles, and then you can see secondary authority is AI summaries. And again, we're going to learn about a court case that just recently happened where they relied 100% on AI summaries and they used it as a primary authority when it really, we know here, is its secondary authority. So the hierarchy of tax authority, not all sources carry the same weight. When I'm talking about, we saw the hierarchy at the very top is our law of the land, the Internal Revenue Code. So when conflict occurs, the higher authority will always win. So understanding this authority helps you with determining what rule governs and which sources are reliable. So if we break it down into primary and secondary authority, primary authority is what we saw listed a little bit, but here is just more expanded. We see the Internal Revenue Code, the law of the land, and we go into more authoritative sources here. For the second authority, like I said, we have the AI generated summaries, tax articles, and this is why I think a lot of the tax articles are written at the very bottom. Most of them have a disclaimer that says, this is not tax advice, not legal advice, and that we are responsible, we the readers are responsible of verifying its validity. So tax professionals, we must base our positions on primary authority. And we can't rely it, like I said, on AI summaries or a tax article written by somebody else. It has to be the law of the land. So here's our first polling question. And again, if you can just put in the chat here and circle the answer to this question, pick whichever, it doesn't matter what your answer. We just need to make sure that we record your response within the chat to take your attendance for today's session. So a tax article from Bloomberg Tax states that a deduction is allowed. The Internal Revenue Code states that it is not allowed. Which one is primary authority? And we know the answer is the Internal Revenue Code. That is our primary authority. Even though Bloomberg Tax, which is a very reputable publishing company, will say that it is allowed as a deduction. At the end of the day, the Internal Revenue Code is the one that mandates the law. So if you can answer your polling question, even if you just let us know that you're here, your attendance will be counted for our first polling question. So now if we look at the structure of the Internal Revenue Code, I told you it's Title 26 of our law. And so when we look at Title 26, we know that the Internal Revenue Code is divided by sections. And then it's divided by subsections and paragraphs and subparagraphs and clauses. Again, we're not reading this as an attorney, but we need to be very familiar on the structure of the tax authority, which is our tax law. We know that the general rule for the Internal Revenue Code is always going to start with all income is taxable, a very broad rule, very general rule. But then as we read through this code, we're going to find exceptions to the general rule or even additions to the general rule. And so we see here, we start off with the general rule, then we see exceptions, limitations, definitions, and very special rules. So an example here is Code Section 274. And we know with the little squigglies, that's a shorthand for the word section. So we see it starts off with our very first title, right? Title 26 of the US Code, which is our tax code, has Section 274. And it has a title of what that section is. It says it's the disallowance of certain entertainment, etc. expenses. So we see here, that's the section 274. And then this is just an expert, the very top is just a screenshot of the top of the tax law, section 274. As we keep reading into what is section 274, we see that we start off with a general rule. That's what we're always going to start off with, subsection A. And this subsection A has then later a paragraph. And these numbers, it starts off with the first lowercase letter, which is the subsection, and then you go into numerical formats. And then you can see towards the bottom, then it has capital letters. So here it's a hierarchy also within the tax code section. We see that the general rule in subsection In section 274, subsection A, paragraph 1 says no deduction otherwise allowable under this chapter shall be allowed for any item. And so it talks about entertainment and it talks about any type of connection with a facility that provides entertainment. So it starts off, like I said, with the general rule. But then you also have subparagraphs, which is the capital letter here that you see for the activity. And so here it just talks about each level is going to add more specificity and it's going to either provide exceptions or more guidance into the general rule. But this is mostly how our tax code is structured with general rules and then exceptions to that general rule. And I think this is why it's so important as tax professionals that yes, we know that the general rule is that we're taxed at our worldwide income unless there's an exception that follows it. And the tax code is full of exceptions that allow a deduction to that worldwide income. So if we look here for meals and entertainment, right? We started off with code section 274 and the general rule that they're not deductible, where certain entertainment expenses are not deductible. But then it talks about a limitation on under subsection N. Meals are generally limited to 50% deductibility. And then it talks about other subsections that also include more exceptions to that rule. Not all meals are 50%, or unless they are 50% if they meet certain requirements. So when we're doing our tax research, we need to first start with the general rule. At the very top, what does the code say? It disallows entertainment expenses, including meals. Okay, but then as soon as we start reading more into it, we review the exceptions that talk about business meals are allowed at 50%. What about those meals that are provided to the general public? Are those 50% or are they 100%? And that's where we're going to do an example together on this deductibility. So when we start our tax research, we go through a 5-step process where we start off with step number 1. First, identify and define the question, right? We're going to gather all of the client facts. What entity type are they? Are they sole proprietor? Are they an S Corp? Are they a shareholder in an S Corp? What's their filing status, the dates, the contracts? We're going to first define the question. So this is why, again, I've reminded last session, when a client calls us to ask us a quick question, it never is a quick question because we need to gather all of the facts first before we can give them an answer. Step number 2 is first choose your tools, right? How are we going to begin our tax research? And there's free tools like the Cornell Law is one of my favorite because it has exactly the law as it is written on this website. Of course, you can start off with AI just for it to provide us code sections that we can go in and further research and verify. And again, we're going to go through an example together. We're going to use keyword searches to locate that code section. And step number 3, we sort it by authority. We're going to look at our hierarchy. What comes first? It's the Internal Revenue Code. Then it comes the regulations, the subsections of the regulation, court cases. Our secondary authority, remember, that's AI summaries and that's tax articles written by other professionals. And we're going to document our findings. Yes, we probably find the answer pretty quickly in the age of AI, but always document it in a tax memo. And we're going to talk about how to write a tax memo because this is the most structured way that you can organize your thoughts and the conclusion on how we are taking a tax position. And step number 5, verify the compliance. We need to make sure that we're following Circular 230 due diligence requirements, right? That we're finding the right answer based on the actual facts, that we're not trying to fudge the facts, but that we are providing honest answers to the questions that we are bringing in from our clients. So now with tax research in the age of AI, right? Before, I can tell you back when I was doing my master's degree we had a whole semester of tax research class. So this is just an overview of a 50-minute class, but back then, and it was in 2007, we actually had to carry the tax code with us. And it was huge. It was 2 big books that we would have to carry for our class, and we would do tax research there. Thankfully, we don't have to do that anymore, and it's the digital age now. So yes, AI, definitely we can leverage AI to help us with tax research. So we start off with AI. The number one rule when we're doing AI is I know we did a session on AI on writing prompts earlier in the circle community, and we have a recording for it. But we know the very first step is first give it a role to the AI. Who the AI should act as? It's going to act as a tax expert. Is it going to act as a tax expert that specializes in tax research? That is even more helpful. And then we have to present it the client scenario, the specific facts of the case, the dates, the entity that it is. Is it just a sole proprietor? What type of business is it? Have our client scenario. And then we have to give the AI the actual question that we're coming up with. And of course, demand the authoritative guidance that it will use. We need for it to look at primary authority, not secondary authority. And of course, explain to us in plain English what the conclusion is for the question that we are asking. So here's an example of an AI prompt, right? We're going to say you are a tax professional performing tax research, federal tax research. Of course, if you're performing research for your state tax, then you would change that to state. But here we're giving it a role first. We're telling it how to act, step into the shoes of a tax professional. And then we're going to give it the scenario. And then we're going to end it with, of course, determine the question. We want it to determine whether meals are 50% deductible or 100% deductible, and cite the relevant Internal Revenue Code sections, Treasury regulations, and IRS guidance, and explain to us the reasoning and any exceptions. So where does AI fit in the tax research world or a tax professional world? It's easy for us to use AI to identify quick, relevant code sections. But our step number 2 is to go verify those relevant code sections. We're not going to trust AI because it says it's section 274, subsection N. We are going to physically go and look on the website for Cornell law and verify that that is exactly what that subsection refers to. So it's good for it to flag the exceptions, to dig into the code, into the primary resources, and give us that research time back. Where before AI, we used to manually have to go in and do a lot of research that would take hours looking into the tax code. It can also be very helpful AI in drafting the memo, the tax memo. I use it all the time to draft my tax memos. But of course, whenever it gives me the output, I always double check and triple check because we have to trust but verify. And so, yes, getting up to speed to unfamiliar topics, it's really good AI and explaining, explain to me and at the level of an 8th grader. What is the deductibility of business meals? It's a really good tool just to get us started with a topic that we're not familiar. I can tell you right now that I'm not too familiar with foreign taxes. I would go to AI to help me at least start the beginning process of doing my research into foreign taxes. What it's not good for, or it's not a substitute, is the most important one at the very bottom right, your professional judgment and analysis. For you to go verify that Internal Revenue Code section that it's citing, is it correct? Because again, we're going to talk about a tax court case where the attorney did not go and verify the sources that the AI was giving them as a citation. So hallucination does happen in AI. What does that mean? Is that AI is out there browsing millions, billions of data, that it starts getting really confused and starts reading into things that really are not and interpreting them incorrectly. So that is a hallucination, and it's very common with AI. I know I have seen less and less because you kind of start training your AI into, hey, that wasn't right. Or you start pushing back into, why are you saying that business meals are 75% deductible? We still have to use our own judgment, professional judgment, and professional research for this. So yes, common pitfalls that happen with AI, or that we could do as an accident, is really copying exactly what AI is stating as a conclusion. Always verify AI's reasoning. The verification pipeline, of course, we're going to locate first within the AI output. What is it telling us that the cited code is? The primary authority, section 274, subsection N. Let's go and find out that it's real. And I said here, example, Cornell Law, which is exactly what I use to verify the access of the Internal Revenue Code. Read the relevant subsection carefully because remember, subsections are usually definitions or exceptions to the general rule. Step number 3, check those Treasury regulations, the code sections, subsections. It might give you a long subsection paragraph and clause, but we're going to go and dig for it and make sure that we read it and see it with our own eyes that that is the law that it's stating. And of course, step number 4 is IRS guidance or case law if needed. We always want to make sure that if it's still not very clear, let's have it find tax court cases that discuss this specific issue that we're having. Because of course, here's where I'm just putting in an example. What the AI is stating is section 274N. We're going to go and verify that that is exactly what it says in the law. And then we document our findings with a tax memo. Tax memos, the way, there's findings that we get doing research through AI, we verify it through the tax law. How do you organize it and structure it in a way that we can remember and understand where our thought process and where our conclusion came from? We start off with first the facts. You're going to state only those facts that are affecting the tax issue, right? State who is it? Is it an individual? Is it a business? What are the facts of the case? Just tell the story of this tax memo. And then we're going to do the issue. We're going to list it as an issue. What is the tax question that we're trying to answer? And then the authority. What do we rely? What was the primary authority that we are relying for the conclusion? And then the analysis, right? Where we say, yes, section 274N talks about a 50% business meal deduction. That's exactly what the tax law says. And in this case, and then we apply it to our case. In this case, the taxpayer did qualify because they took a prospective client and they documented the purpose of their business meal. And then at the end, you end with the conclusion. Based on all of the facts, based on the authoritative guidance, the conclusion is that meals are deductible at a 50% rate. Now, we do have for you after the session today, we're going to give you a link of a AI prompt template that you can load into the AI to help you do that research. And we're going to go through an example together too. So we know that the rigorous research does elevate you as a tax pro to a trusted advisor. Again, because we're not going to be quick on our answers for our clients. When they have tax questions, that's where we say, okay, as an advisor, let's move you into an advisory package so that we can really spend the time into looking into those tax questions that you have, and we can do the proper research to make sure that you're in a better position than you were before, because we need the authoritative guidance, primary authority to support your tax position. And we're going to see this case, which just was issued in 2026. It's a court case with Klincko versus the IRS, versus the commissioner. And so the facts behind this, Peter Klincko, he is an attorney that practices in LA, Los Angeles, and his primary business, he does have a restaurant. So a restaurant that's organized as an LLC. It's operated as a single member LLC. He's the only owner, and he actually reports this LLC restaurant on his Schedule C. As he scales about 60 employees. So he's on a Schedule C. You and I were probably like, why would you be on a Schedule C with 60 employees? But he is, an attorney, not a tax attorney. He's an attorney that practices just other law, I guess, general tax, not tax law, but regular law. He has a rental he's also reporting a rental on Schedule E. So look, those are the facts of the taxpayer, where 90% of his revenue is coming from credit card payments and 10% from actual cash. Well, he was pulled into an audit because his losses or his income was at 1.6 million, but it wasn't matching the 1099Ks. It wasn't matching the 1099 NECs that he had on file. And so his return was pulled for an audit. Well, Mr. Attorney, Mr. Klincko here was trying to be creative and said, okay, I don't have receipts, because he didn't keep any receipts. And so he's trying to find other ways to get out of this liability. And so he came up with, well, according to law, this notice of deficiency that was given to Klincko, the attorney, did not have a wet signature. And so because it doesn't have a wet signature, it's invalid, and it basically throws the entire audit and total notice of deficiency out the window. And so his argument was that. And so what he did was present evidence to the court of different court cases that talked about the needed wet signature on certain notices, on certain offer of compromises. And so here there's a lot going on, but we can see here are the fabricated AI cases that were given to him. But then the actual cases, what these cases didn't mention, according to Klincko, as how he presented the evidence, was talking about what signatures. What they really were talking about, you can see this first case was talking about innocent spouse relief, had nothing to do with a wet signature, had nothing to do with the specific facts of his case. Then it talked about a renegotiation of a board case and management fees. Again, AI hallucinated, did not give him correct court cases and citations of court cases. But the tax court judge, very knowledgeable in the tax law, because of course that's his full-time job, knowing the law, he identified these AI hallucinations. And basically at the end, he mandated he's pushing for a verification mandate of AI research. And so this is just an eye opener for all of us that yes, even attorneys, everyone is using AI today. And even attorneys are presenting the evidence to a tax court judge that's written by AI. His problem, his mistake was not verifying what AI had given him. And so, yes, Chief Justice Roberts, the judge in this case, mandates that lawyers must verify every citation against official reports. And so, yes, this is where we are coming up with our tax research, is looking into the actual evidence of that's presented in the law. Now, with that, let's talk about tax research as an example. We're going to go into actually doing this together. We have Mary Martinez. She is a self-employed tax professional. She would like to host an event where she provides catered food and beverages, and she will have free tax education session called Tax Deductions for Small Business Owners. She plans to invite her clients, her current clients, but also open it up to anyone in the hopes of getting more clientele. So yes, it's not an invite just to a specific group of people, which is current clients, but also, hey, invite anyone that you can that's a business owner that wants to come and just learn for free, right? I'm going to provide a session and I'm going to provide you food and beverages. So are these meals and beverages 100% deductible or 50% deductible? Because so far what we've learned in today's session, right, we're looking into code section 274N that talked about 50% deductibility. So now I'm going to share my screen to show you just how we can do this into a tax research using AI. Let me just stop my share here. Okay, so this is, and I recorded this, but I'm going to walk you through it, right? The first thing that I do is I use ChatGPT. I use a combination of AI tools. I use ChatGPT, I use Claude, and then I also use Notebook LM. Notebook LM does come included with your Google Workspace if you do have a Google Workspace account. ChatGPT, I pay for the paid version, and Claude as well. And then maybe if George can help me with the price ranges so that that can give you an idea of how much to invest in these type of AI tools. So Claude, the first thing that I do is I change this here. I'll go ahead and play this for you. I changed it over to thinking 5.2. And the reason is because I wanted to do deep research. The other type of versions of ChatGPT, it's a quicker answer. Now that we're doing tax research, I needed to really spend some time in analyzing what we're doing. So here, the first thing is I have said, analyze this prompt and let me know when you are ready so that I can provide you my scenario to begin the research. And I'm going to paste the exact prompt that I will give you after the session. It's a pretty long prompt, but it's basically telling the AI only use authoritative primary sources and give me the citations. So you'll see that here. I paste the entire prompt. And then now, I let ChatGPT analyze it because you need to make sure that I'd like to give it, have a time for it to process. And then so now it says, okay, send me the scenario. It already analyzed my prompt. And so I'm copying exactly the scenario that I just provided to you in the example. We can see here it's, it's thinking. And of course, I for purposes of this demo, I kind of paused it and stopped the recording so that you can see, but it's not this instant. It doesn't take too long, actually, just a couple minutes. But here, it's doing the research, gives me the technical answer. And what I want to do is first, okay, it looks like it's 100% deductible meals. But what I'm very interested in is every time it cites a code section, a primary treasury regulation section, because it says right here, hey, this code section says so and so. So I need to go and verify this. So what I do, I just copy it over and open a browser and just Google it. And what I'm looking for is Cornell law. Remember, here's the very first one it gives me back, Cornell law. And I open it up. I go into that treasury regulation. And of course, I didn't memorize the treasury regulation, so I have to go back and forth. Okay, what was it? It was C24. And so I'm just scrolling down to find subsection C. And then it said subsection C, paragraph 2. And so here's my paragraph 2. And then I'm going to keep scrolling down to find exactly the clause 4, right? It's clause 4. And so as I'm scrolling down, this is in real time. And so there it is. And, I just spent some time reading through this. And some of this language is like, they could have written it in better, just simple language, and they don't. But I'm going to show you how I use Notebook LM to translate this for me. But yes, once I verify that the code sections, subsections, whatever the AI is citing as primary authority, I always come here and check and read it and say, okay, you're right. You're saying it correctly, right? And then the good thing about ChatGPT here, it's asking me towards the end, do you want me to also turn this into a full tax research memo? Assuming that I did all of my research and verified all of those citations, all of that tax law. And yes, I probably want to say, of course, write me that tax memo. And so, yes, ensure that you follow. I just say towards the bottom, ensure that you follow the structure. And I've pasted the exact structure from our slides, right? Where we say the facts, the issue, the authority, and the conclusion, the analysis, and then the conclusion towards the end. And of course, then I copy this, put it in a Google document, and just read through it and make sure that it sounds right and that it didn't change anything. And so here's Claude. The exact same thing that I'm doing is saying analyze the prompt. And once you are done analyzing it, I'm going to give you the facts of the case. And that's exactly what I do. Of course, this is fast forward, so you'll see that it's pretty quick, but it's giving me a bunch of primary authority, and that's exactly what I want. But I want to verify it as well. Here's Notebook LM. With Notebook LM, what I like to use it with, you see I'm copying and pasting the exact code section. And here's where it gives me several prompts on its own. It says, hey, do you want me to tell you the core requirements? And I'm just going to say, give me a high overview summary of this section, right? And so it's going to think through it and it's going to give me a section. What I like about Notebook LM is over here to the right, it gives you several available assets, which are really cool. A slide deck, it converts everything that you feed it. Notebook LM does not look outside of what you have fed it as data. So you can upload a bunch of PDF documents or even website links and have it create you an entire slide deck with it. Also, what I do like about it is this at the top left is the audio overview. The audio overview is really cool because it creates like a podcast for you, where it's actually two people speaking to each other in a conversation, just like a podcast. And so it's a really good way to learn some of this, what people call boring tax law. And it also creates infographics. I like the infographics because it's just a one pager of an image, which is the images that you usually see during my presentations. Like we saw when it did the Klincko case of the attorney with the citations of which cases he was citing, and those tax court cases had nothing to do with his case.